Greg left his body. He was rescued from a hellish experience by an angel. He saw his pre-birth memory was taken before the council, and then the angel took him through a portal where he found himself face to face with God. Follow along today to find out the startling details. Leave a comment in support of Greg sharing his story for the first time. And if you've had a profound spiritual experience that you'd like to share on the show, you'll find the link to apply in the description box. You mentioned to me that you've had a pre-birth experience. Is that something that you would like to share about?
Yeah, I can share that one. That one was later in my life.
You want to start chronologically at the beginning with your first?
I think that would be good. I think what I would first like to share with people, because they don't know me, or for people who don't know me.
Go for it.
The first thing is a few things about my personality. So that way people understand the perspective that this is all coming from. The first thing that I would tell people is I'm like a crazy, super skeptical guy. And what I mean by being skeptical is like, if someone says something or if there's a belief or whatnot, I need some form of evidence, double, triple, quadruple checked. I'm just that kind of guy. And so I am like an ultimate doubting Thomas. And I just think that that's important to note because I rarely say 100% about anything in life. And when I say 100%, it's pretty much something that's really a given. That's my standard. And the other thing I should probably share too, and I try to hide it as much as I can, but I do have Asperger's and I do have some very strange...
Me too.
You do too?
Yes.
So, there's quirky, weird things. I have a lot of weaknesses. I have very few strengths. And I was researched as a child. I was institutionalized. And so there's a lot of strange anomalies that they found about me, the way my brain works. And so it's a very strange story. My whole life, which I don't think we're going to be able to do the whole thing in quote unquote 1 hour, but I'll just share, like you said, in chronological order. And if maybe people want to hear more, they can ask. If you ever want to do this again, we can get into that, but just to give that background.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. It will really set the stage for people to be able to understand your story better. So do you want to start at the very first spiritual experience that you've had? I know you've had experiences going back to the time you were a child.
Yeah, my very first one was when I was 7. And I was just playing toys on my own. And something began to communicate with me. And I didn't think much of it. I just kind of played with the toys. And they were first showing me visions. So I started having visions. I started seeing like really not very great things. I saw like tanks. I saw children running. A lot of pain is what I saw. And I didn't just see it, I could feel it. And it saddened me deeply. In fact, just thinking about it right now, I'm going to start crying. I'm going to try not to cry throughout this because it's very, very, this is a very long, painful story. And that's how it really began. And there was a question, which is very odd because I didn't know at the time. In fact, I found out about almost 20 years later that, and I'm not going to share what that question was, but there was a question posed to me from this particular quote unquote entity, whatever it was. And the reason that I don't share this particular part is just because, honestly, because of the judgment that might come from it. So it's not particularly important for anybody to know what was asked from me. But I was asked a question. And what I found out 20 years later or so was that my own brother was asked the same question by an entity too. And from the sounds of it, because we started lining up the dates, it was like right around the same exact time. So it was very odd. We didn't know. Can you believe that? We never knew. We never talked about it till many years later. And so that was kind of an odd thing. And he received certain visions. They were different than the ones I got though. And his answer was actually the opposite of what mine was. So we both made very different decisions, I think, that set the tone for the direction that our life was going to go. And when I did answer the question, something odd happened. I didn't notice till probably about maybe 2 weeks later or something that my body was marked. I know that sounds very odd, but all of a sudden, making the decision that I made, it seemed to have marked my body. As crazy as that sounds, I got a mark that appeared on my upper thigh, on my upper leg. I didn't know what it was. I didn't think about it. My family never knew about it. In fact, I showed it to my mom many, many years later, probably many years later, a couple decades later. And I remember when I showed her, she was pretty shocked. She's like, "What the heck is this? What'd you do to your body?" I'm like, "I didn't do this, Mom. This appeared on my body, a long time ago." So that was kind of an odd thing, which again, there was an entity that told me what it was. Kind of weird to get into that too. But so that's just one little thing. And I think, as strange as it sounds, for a doubting Thomas, for there to be a mark like that, that's almost like, okay, that's really strange. But all right, so I move on. And then after that particular moment, it seemed to have opened up something inside of me. But the sad part was, as I've discovered through this journey, is the place inside of you where the joy comes from, that is also the most fragile part of you that can be hurt the most. And so what we tend to do as humans, and we do this very subconsciously, so we're not really totally aware that we do this, we're actually close parts of ourselves off. And we do that as a protective mechanism. And when you close off that, you're also closing off a part of your joy. This is why children are so joyous and they get hurt throughout life. And that place where the light comes through is slowly closing. And we don't even realize it because it's so slow. And I'm a very open heart kind of person. I guess I could try to find a way to close my heart. And I had a moment of it a long time ago, and I hated the way it felt. It's just my personality. I cannot close my heart. And I do get hurt a lot because of that, but I just care too much. I just can't. I've always been that way. I'm just a very, very caring and loving person. And part of the question that was posed to me had a lot to do with people's pain and suffering and the understanding of it. What would I technically kind of be willing to do in regards to it? Like, I always want the best for people. It's just been a big part of this whole thing. But basically after that, I started feeling this extreme emotional pain. So this started at now 8 years old, and it was really ramping up. And this is really important to clarify, because all the doctors and stuff that I ended up having to see, I'd never been abused. I had a really good family, both parents, good, just great family. I really just extremely fortunate in that regard. But, and this happened to nobody else in my family, obviously. And I fell into not just a deep depression. It wasn't just depression. It just felt like a torment on my soul. And it's very painful for a kid, to go through something like that. So that was the beginning of it, right? And I made a choice a very long time ago when I was a kid. It's been a huge part of my whole life, and everything that I do is because of this. I wanted to find joy and happiness, no matter what it looked like. And you couldn't trick me. Like, you couldn't tell me, hey, this religion is going to, fix you. And I did. By the way, I tried all the religions. I read a lot of spiritual books. I was fighting I wanted to feel happiness. I wanted to feel joy and everything. The crazy part was, if anybody can understand this, it wasn't just sadness. It literally felt like, have you ever had a nightmare that's so bad and you wake up and you actually still feel like you're in the nightmare? You can still feel that vibe. And that's what my life felt like every day. There was this strange vibe to it, and I can't quite describe it. And it almost feels like there was a portal open or something that is ordinarily closed. And my brother we had a word for it because he got to experience it. He said for about, I'm trying to remember how long he said experience it for, but he's like maybe a minute. And he called it, because when I say everything changed, like when you would hear birds, singing their beautiful tweet, 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 it didn't sound like that to me. It sounded like a bird yelling, like everything was so like dark and like a nightmare. But this was 24/7. This was my life as a child. And again, very confusing because nobody had answers. This was a long time ago too. And of course, my mother being concerned, and all that kind of stuff. And she, let's go see a doctor, right? And what do they tell you? Oh, you have a chemical imbalance, and let's put you on medications. And it was really bad because that was all new. I was actually the youngest child in the world to be put on the certain medications that had never really been attempted on children. and they were putting me on very high levels. And then eventually they took me into, I was institutionalized. I did attempt to take my life. Ooh, I hate saying that. I'm a little ashamed of it.
So many have been there.
I tried the first time because I tried many times throughout my life. And I tried the first time when I was like 10 years old. And yeah, so they're like, we got to put you somewhere. And I was put somewhere. And when I was in the hospital, they thought I was a little bit of an anomaly because all the kids there had been abused. There's been some very terrible things that happened to the children that I met by being in these hospitals. And then they started doing things like brain scans and they started doing blood work regularly. And then they found some strange things about even my intelligence. It's hard for me to say that because I don't tend to think of myself like a super, super intelligent person, but it intrigued the doctors enough to do a lot of testing. And they found that once it was really odd. And apparently there's less than 1% of people like this, but I didn't even know that they could measure the intelligence of both sides of the brain. I just thought it was an intelligence test, for the whole brain. And so one of the sides of my brain was extremely high. And the other side I was 1 point off of being normal. So I was almost in the not even normal intelligence on one side. And, there was a lot of, I remember them testing me a lot. And I remember they were intrigued by me, the doctors, and they always want to do their studies and everything. But it wasn't helpful for me. Nothing good came out of being in that place for me. Other than as a child, I just wanted to get out and, just be normal for the most part. So I ended up having to, I hate to admit this too, but this was a long time ago. I had to lie and tell them that I was no longer sad and whatnot, because otherwise they weren't going to let me out. And so eventually I did get let out, but nothing had changed. The amount of medications they were giving me, everything they had done, nothing had changed the way that I felt. And instinctively, I knew, I actually told them, I remember telling them, these medications aren't going to change this. This is not a chemical imbalance. And clearly now that I worked in the medical field now for over 2 decades, and I know that this is not about chemical imbalances for the majority of people. That's my own personal opinion. Obviously, I'm not giving medical advice or anything of that sort. So that was the first stage of what happened. And I lived my life trying to be as normal as I could and literally just trying to get through day to day. I sadly also, again, attempted things to end my life. Most of the time I was poisoning myself and it wasn't working. For some reason, I would continue to survive, and that was really frustrating for me. And so I kept trying to plan different things. And then eventually, because I thought about it every day. And then eventually when I was 18, I decided that I had to do something so extreme so that I would stop failing, at what it is that I was trying to do.
If you've been feeling disconnected from spirit, disconnected from divine love, I have an offering for you. I now offer one-on-one energy work sessions. It's my very favorite work that I've ever done. I completely rebalance your energy field and give you a transfusion of divine love and healing energy for any specific area of need, and follow it up with feedback on what I find in your energy field, a little bit of spiritual coaching, and simple takeaway practices that you can take into your life and implement to help you cultivate a deep connection with divine love. I offer 30-minute sessions, 45-minute sessions, and I'm currently offering 50% off on my 4-session package. Check the link in the description to sign up.
And then eventually when I was 18, I decided that I had to do something so extreme so that I would stop failing, at what it is that I was trying to do. So I laid out these Costco bottles of different types of pills, pharmaceuticals, ibuprofen, Tylenol, pharmaceuticals that I got out of the cabinet. I just lined up all these pills and I took about 836 pills in one sitting. And I remember, I really regret doing that too. I wasn't sure if I was going to share any of this part. The problem is that it seems to be part of the story, that's the problem.
Yeah.
And so I took them with alcohol too, hoping that would make it worse, because the bottles always say don't take with alcohol, right? And I did it around midnight so that nobody would find me. And what ended up happening that night is just extremely strange, because I was in and out of consciousness. I saw a lot of strange things. particularly dark things. And sometimes it felt like it literally felt like I was dying. That's what it felt like. I remember being very sick and it just felt like I was drifting away. And I was eventually found around 7 a.m. And apparently I survived. And obviously my mother was, you know, probably not happy to find me like that. But my whole family had known that this had been an issue. And so she took me to the ER and they basically said, there's not much we can do. He took these things so long ago. So they just started doing the activated charcoal thing and they put the tube down the throat and whatever. And this was the beginning of so I already had some strange things. And then there was a long periods of time where no strange things happened. And now this was another point when I was 18 in the hospital, when there was nobody in the room. There was all these beings of light standing next to my bed. And they spoke in unison. They spoke with one voice, but they kept repeating the same thing. It wasn't a chant, but they kept repeating like, you'll never do it again. You'll never do it again. You'll never do it again. You'll never do it. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is crazy. I'm already planning the next time. Once I get out of here, in about a month, I'll have to do something better, to finish this. But they weren't just saying the words. There was almost like, dare I say, almost like a psychic way of seeing, like I could see the future. And somehow I knew that I never would do it again. I could feel it in my soul. And I was thinking, but in my head, I'm like, again, Mr. Doubting Thomas, right? I'm like, no, of course what is this? Like, no, I'm going to do it again. I'd almost ignore them. And then I remember the doctor walking in and he said, I want to have a private conversation with you real fast. And I was like, okay, well, what is it? He said, it says here that you took almost 1,000 pills. And I don't believe it. And I said, why? Like, I didn't really care, whether he believed me or not, but I was curious. I am a very curious person. I said, well, why? And he said, because it's impossible. He said, nobody could take that level of pills and survive it. And I said, well, what would happen? I was curious. And he's like, it would have caused basically damage to your heart or caused you to have a heart attack, something along those lines, What I found out once I got out of the hospital, so I'm going to skip over some stuff. I think I found out about a month later that my heart had been severely damaged. My heart now didn't work right. It would stop and then it would flutter and then it would, it was all over the place. It was so erratic that any time that I would see like a nurse or a doctor go for an appointment, they check you, they'd always be like, whoa, something's wrong. Have you had this looked at? And I was like, yeah. Because I was told, this is, I was told actually later by a cardiologist and he said, this is going to end you. Like, you're not going to survive this. You maybe have 10 years if you keep it up. Because the way that it's working is stressing your heart and your heart's going to give out. And I thought, great, there you go. There's my way out. I'll just not do anything about it. And so that's kind of how I just lived. I just lived with it. And then, of course, like even normal people, like if I was, dating a girl and if she had her head on my chest, she would say, oh my God, what's going on with your heart? I'm like, what? She goes, it sounds like it stops. And then all of a sudden it flutters and it does these things. And I was like, yeah, I know, I've been told before, don't worry about it, whatever. And so this is kind of how my life was going at the time. And I was looking for a lot of answers. I was looking for, like I said, I would read some spiritual books and stuff like that. To be honest, I ended up becoming extremely frustrated by spiritual books. I totally quit reading all of them because you hear stories and they're trying to tell you, oh, I had this out of body experience, or I had this other experience and it's so wonderful, or all these different things, or you can do fasting and you'll purify the body, or like all these things, like, oh, if you meditate, and I would try the things and they weren't going nowhere for me, right? And I'd gone to so many different churches and I got baptized and that didn't do anything. And I tried Buddhism and I was trying all these different things. And I always felt like the canary in the coal mine, meaning I think that if I ever find the answer, it's going to be clear as day for someone like me. Where I see other people, and I'm not judging anybody else, but it's been my observation, because I've met people who really feel called to all sorts of different beliefs and religious systems. I mean, whether it's believing totally in Jesus or going to the jungle and they're into ayahuasca and medicine man, and I mean, all over the place. And I've had friends all across the board in regards to this. But for me, it was always like, only the truth will be able to solve whatever it is that I've got. That was my belief. That's the way that I felt. And so I was always open to and most things. The other bad part, this is also embarrassing, is that I was having such a hard time getting through life. And I was always one of these kids. I was like it's weird for me to say this, it sounds probably arrogant and egotistical, but I was a really good kid. Like, I never wanted to hurt other kids. I wasn't violent. I didn't damage toys. I mean, I was very gentle, and that's just the way that I was. And so I was never into like drugs or being a bad kid or any of this kind of stuff. But with all the emotional pain, once, kids started drinking and these type of things as you get a little older, I remember just telling myself, like, dude, why are you not doing this? You're saying you're looking for a way out, and you're afraid to do these things because they might harm you. It's like, oh my God, that's right. I guess I should just do this. And so, I went off the deep end, as far as like just hanging around with all the wrong people, not doing anything that would hurt anybody, but I wasn't basically afraid to take any substance at that point. And so, I went through that phase and doing all these kind of crazy things. But the one thing that really changed everything, I was always open to, again, the spirituality part, and looking specifically, not just so much spirituality as much as I would say specifically looking for joy and happiness. That was the thing, no matter how that was going to come. Obviously not with drugs or anything like that, but like something real. Drugs are temporary. I wasn't looking for something temporary. I was looking for something permanent. And so some wild, crazy day happened, and I won't go through all the details because it would be way too long. But all I can tell you is I went with a really good friend of mine and another person who all I'll say is that he's my best friend. So two very good friends. And we decided to take a little trip. We just went to this particular place. It was in a canyon. There's a beautiful river. It's just such a gorgeous, gorgeous place. And it was like secret. We, had stumbled upon it. And so we went there. We were hanging out for the day. It was a beautiful day. We're all hanging out at the river and stuff like that. And all I can tell you is that something, and I don't know what it was, but there's something that came over me. And I felt like I wanted to be alone, and like in a very peaceful, quiet place. So I told my friends, I said, dude, I'm really sorry. We're all supposed to be hanging out and having a good time, but I think I'm going to walk up the river and I'm going to spend a little alone time. You guys do your thing, and I'm going to go be alone for a while. So I ended up walking pretty far away, and the river was really loud, so loud that if I were to yell at them, they wouldn't even be able to hear me. The river was very loud. And I'll leave a lot of details out because this is a very long thing. All I can tell you is that I sat on a very big rock that was right by the river. And I have a name for this day because this is the day that changed my life. See if I can do it without crying again. The crying is because there's just been so much pain, that's why. And so I sat there, and I don't know what it was. I was just wanting to be quiet, and I started listening to the water and just sitting there and closing my eyes a little bit. And then I started kind of going into such a peaceful mode, and I started hearing my heart. Have you ever done that where you can hear your own heartbeat?
Yeah, for sure.
And I could hear that it stopped. My heart would stop. And it was really odd because every time it stopped, I felt like I was inching closer to death. I just felt it. And it kept getting longer times without beating. And then boom, it would just keep me alive just barely. And then it would do a flutter, and it would do this thing. And I honestly thought I was going to die that day. I was like, I think my heart's stopping. Like, what is happening? But I didn't care, right? I was like, okay. I wouldn't consider myself a fearless person, but I do a lot of strange things that seem like pretty fearless. There's people who've told me, they're like, man, I think you're like the bravest person I've ever seen. And I'm not a brave person. I don't consider myself that. But I wasn't afraid of death. If anything, I hate to admit that I longed for it. I hate saying that. So as I inched ever so closely, and my heart was stopping, and I felt myself drifting away. And I started going through, it's almost like I quote scripture on this one because it was so similar to, as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. It was so much like that. And there was so much darkness. First, there was like temptation. I don't know what it was. It was like, first they were trying to tempt me with stupid things, and I just didn't care. So I just continued, down this corridor. And then things started ramping up and getting more dark. And the deeper I got, I realized that whatever it is that was happening, whatever, something was trying to stop me. But I just kept going and kept going, and then it got really bad. It got to the point where it was becoming, I think most people would have panicked, to be honest. And I was just trying to stay calm. And I could hear my heart stopping, and and then eventually I saw my own body. I saw my body laying flat on the earth. And I have a very, very big fear of bugs. I even had that experience where I had a spider crawl in my ear while I was sleeping one night, and I stuck my finger there and squished it in there.
Ooh.
But it just got, I used to sleep with earmuffs.
I don't blame you.
And I think that, so yeah, who likes bugs? I don't know. Maybe there's somebody out there who does, but I didn't. And then all of a sudden, as I'm reaching the end of this, wherever it is that I'm headed, all these bugs start crawling on me. And that was the biggest, most difficult thing out of this whole thing. And I just stayed still because I don't know why, I just felt death. And so I was like, come and get me. I don't know why it happened this day. I can't tell you. There's a lot of weird things about this day, and you're about to hear more because it gets very strange. But basically, they crawled all over my body, and you could just see the shape at this point. I was completely covered. And then my body sank into the earth, like almost like it was decomposing. And then everything went black. And then there was a huge burst of light. Most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I think people would call it an angel. I called her, just a being of light. Nothing but light. Funny thing is, when I was there, when you're in this other place, it's so different than here because you're naked over there. And when I say naked, I don't mean clothing. Your heart's exposed. Whatever's in your heart, it's all there to be seen. You can't hide from it. And she was so exposed. And it was just the things that were emanating off of her. It was everything that I had been looking for my whole life. The love and peace, happiness, the joy, just everything. And I wasn't even before her, I think, for 1 second. And it came out of my heart because normally I think before I speak because I upset a lot of people. Because the way that I talk is, maybe it's direct because I don't know how to it's part of the Asperger's thing, I think.
Yes.
And so I tend to have to control the way that I speak a lot just because I don't want to hurt other people. And with her, there was no chance. It literally just came straight from my heart. I was even shocked. I'm like, the words just came out and I just said, I want to be like you. Like, that happened in my 20s. So it'd been a long road, suffering through this deep sadness for about roughly 20 years. And I said, I want to be like you. And I'll always remember her response. She said, you are me, and I am you. And that's what she told me. And then immediately, still the doubting Thomas that I am, I immediately started not trying to correct her, but this is what I did. I was like, what are you talking about? Look at me. I'm not like you. You're so beautiful. And I am such a flawed person. She didn't say anything. The thing about her was that it felt like she basically said, and you could feel it from her, she basically said, I spoke truth. And that's all there is to it. Like, she doesn't repeat herself. She doesn't try to argue with me about this whole thing. Then we just spent time together. We were literally I was just there with her. And then, what was funny? The whole time I was there, I know that she could see my heart. She could see everything about me. And that's why it was ironic that I tried to point it out to her. I was like, look at this, I'm trash, and it's not like she didn't know what I was. And she reached out her hand and she took my hand and we started to fly away into the heavens, or what we would call like the cosmos or outer space. And as we began to drift away, I could see planet Earth as I was leaving. And as we were leaving, I felt something like stop, almost like basically I would call it what the Buddhists call it, and even Christians have a word for it, but attachments. I felt immediately all the love that is attached to every friend, every family member, every person that I cared about. And then the final attachment was to my body, to my ego, right? Because I'm this male, blah, blah, blah. You know, I don't see things like that, but clearly I'm in this body, right? And that might bother some people these days with the simple talks, but anyway, sorry. But so, yeah, so I felt that. And I remember feeling so much love for everybody that I was about to leave. And I remember feeling a little confusion because I actually felt like I should go back. I was like, oh, I love them so much. I never felt like that during life. During life, I was in so much pain. And now I'm seeing life in a totally different way. And I feel all this. And so I'm with her. I'm pulled between these two directions. I'm stuck right here. And then I remember talking to myself. You know, I don't know if you ever have to like talk yourself off a ledge.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, dude, you need to calm down or whatever. You talk to yourself, right? And I told myself, because in this moment, I was so elated that you kind of forget what you did feel like my whole life. So I told myself, I'll always remember this too. I was like, dude, you wanted this. Isn't this what you wanted? And I'm like, oh my God, that's right. And it was a really hard decision to make though, because I felt all that love still, but I was like, no, I'm going to override that. I remember what I wanted. And although it was very difficult, I let go. And she took me. And as she took me, I didn't realize there's a lot of things that I won't be sharing in detail, but there's a massive amount of information. Maybe a lot of people disagree. But basically, stars are doors. They're doorways. They're doorways for the spirit. The reason I know this is not because I read any book. There's a lot of stuff that I'm probably going to say, and the majority of it, or almost all of it, is not something I read. The things that I directly experienced, things that I know because I went through it. And she took me to a star. I think that's why they call them star gates, because the word gate and the word door, it's the same thing. And so she took me through one, and when we went through it, we shot at a ridiculous speed. And we're going through this thing at a crazy speed. I can't even begin to try to explain how fast we were going. And then we hit another one, and we just turned direction, started going a totally different another speed. And then boom, and it was like we were traveling, and wherever it was super far away. Like there, you couldn't see planet Earth at all. We were not even close. In fact, I remember feeling like I am so lost out here, and I have no idea where I'm going, and there is no way I can make it back to planet Earth. Zero chance. I'm way too far away, and I don't know the way. She knows the way. Little ironic is that I also felt like I was merging with her the more that we traveled, like we were becoming almost like one, which was kind of odd. To this day, I still oftentimes wonder, like, she said, you are me and I am you. Was that me? Or a little confusion about all that. You know, I still have a lot of questions, right? I can only all I try to do is be this is my whole methodical thinking and trying to be very, like, I don't like placebo to get in the way, or belief systems. Like, I don't believe this or believe that. I didn't see Jesus there. Anybody would want to know, you know, like I didn't see Buddha either. You know, this is what was happening. And we're traveling the cosmos for quite a while. And then eventually we arrive. I'm not going to go, well, okay, this is really odd, because I arrive and there's like what appears to be like a council, like these beings in a circle, like out in the cosmos. And they spoke with one voice in unison. And they told me something. I'll only share part of it, but they said, we've been waiting for you. And it just crazy hit me, because in that moment I realized these guys knew who I was, and they apparently were waiting for me. They told me why, which is the part I'm going to leave out. I feel like it's a little embarrassing, and I also feel like it could be taken the wrong way. So that's why I'm concerned.
Well, that's totally okay.
So I'll leave that out for now. And they said this, and they kind of like visions. And this is one of the parts that has to do, you were asking about remembering when I was born.
Yeah.
Because there was a moment where I was taken back to when I was in the womb. And now I have the answers to certain questions, if anybody's curious, because I am always a curious person. But do you know why most people don't remember when they're a baby in the womb? it's because the body is not developed yet. The brain is not fully developed. You can't, that's why we don't remember a lot of things when we're children. The brain is still growing and developing. However, the spirit is there.
Yeah.
And what these guys did is somehow they tapped into my spirit, which is eternal. And it took me back to that moment in time. It was like I was reliving it. And now I know exactly what it feels like when you're inside the mother's womb. In fact, one thing that I learned about it, and it explains a lot about things written, like even in the Bible. So many, because to be honest, I tried to read the Bible when I was really young. I was raised Catholic. I was trying to be Christian because I thought Jesus would help me, and getting baptized, I needed help, and I was open to any of it. So I was believing what I was being told. Sadly, it didn't help me, but I knew a lot about, I remember sitting down trying to read the Bible, and it just made no sense to me. I was like, this is going nowhere, and it's not helping me, and I don't get this, right? But I understand this whole idea about being born again. I don't think people really, in my personal opinion, I don't think people really understand what Jesus meant when he said that, and I won't get into that right now. But the number one most important thing I felt when I was in the womb was the deepest peace I've ever felt in my life. And the body does have memory. And it's another thing that I was taught so much by being on the other side, and I've been to the other side just so like a lot. I'm just telling you the most pivotal point of this whole story, because there's so much. I got very strange things that have happened to me, and with this whole doubting Thomas thing that I got going on, I've had enough things to verify certain things. But anyway, so I'm here with these beings, and yes, I go back and I experience a deep peace. I remember feeling the love from my mother, so many things. And I don't know why it helped me understand a lot. And I understand the spirit is always there. It's always with you. It is you, all this stuff. And then we have this body and whatever. But so they said what they said to me, and they're in this circle. And I'm going to jump around a little bit because I'd never seen anything like this council, nothing like it. And I was recently in Japan. So I'm a hydrogen production specialist, by the way. That's, and so I've gone to Japan to learn because they're the best. They know more about hydrogen than anybody in the world. And I utilized it to fix my health because I had major health problems and they were really severe. And as I told you, my heart condition was supposed to end me. Ironically, I found a way. I was told I needed open heart surgery, and I found a way to use hydrogen, believe it or not, molecular hydrogen, to completely fix my heart. My heart's totally fixed. That's why I'm still alive.
Wow.
And I've utilized a lot of the knowledge that I felt was kind of, I guess, given to me. I don't even know how to explain it. So I've developed a lot of health techniques of all things. I went from this guy trying to end myself to I'm literally like, I help people overcome the craziest medical issues. Like it's another story, but that's how I'm just kind of giving you the whole thing, how this happened. But when I was in Japan, this is why it's so weird. I'm in Japan buying this organic produce or whatever. And I look up and there's a gigantic like mural, or I guess you call it a poster, but it was huge. But the reason that it was so intriguing, because I looked at it and it's exactly what I saw. It was that council. And I'm looking at it thinking, what? Because I didn't explain this part of the story. And I'm not done with the whole thing, but the things that I saw, the things that I experienced, I wanted to find it written in some book. I'm sure somebody knows about this. I'm sure somebody's traveled to this place before. I was looking for something so that I say almost validate and make sure that this was correct, because it wasn't like a lot of people's stories. There's a few similarities, but this was quite different. And I never found anything anywhere for a long time, by the way. I just saw that mural recently, like a year ago or something. And so I was like, what is that? So I immediately found somebody who's Japanese, and I was like, what is that? Like, who drew that? Where did this come from? Like, this is nuts. Who did that? And they're like, oh, that's Kukai. I was like, who's Kukai? Never heard of this guy. Like, you don't know Kukai? I'm like, no. And then I started reading all about Kukai, and oh my goodness, this guy blows me away. Unbelievable. And he calls it, there's different realms, and there's a womb. They call it the womb realm. The womb. And they're showing me in the womb. I was like, what? This is totally nuts. And so, and then it actually gets really wild, but because then these beings, I'm going to leave certain details out again. I'll explain some other time why, but I'll just say that they opened almost like a doorway or a portal, and it was at the center of them. So they're in a circle, and they open this portal, and I felt, obviously, the way they communicate with you is very like beyond telepathic, but it's kind of like that. And they were letting me know, this is for you. So I'll tell you, I didn't even have an inch of fear. Didn't even think about it. I just, yeah, okay. It felt actually like an honor, for them to be doing it. It felt like there was almost like a level of sacrifice. I don't know why, but so I go through the portal, and that's where I met God. And I know exactly what he looks like, I know exactly what he sounds like. I could tell you a whole lot of things about him, and it explains so much. But it was unlike anything I'd ever heard about. He's not some white guy with a white beard or, whatever. It was so beyond even any idea or concept that I'd ever had in my head that I honestly didn't recognize him at first, because it was beyond ideas, I guess, that I'd ever had. And I spent a lot of time with him. And what's a little ironic, I'm going to jump around again, because many years later, so I don't know why I'm doing this, I'm just going to share this with you because I think it's so interesting. Many, many, many years later, because I had already had medical issues, and they were actually, and I was living with them and just kind of pushing through. I was pretty young, so I could just push through, but they got progressively worse. In fact, they were getting so severe where I couldn't walk. I was in excruciating pain. I was just like, can I die already? This is way too painful, but I wouldn't die. It was like I was just suffering. And I went and did this particular cleanse. It's a special cleanse. I didn't even believe in it. It's a long story of why it happened. Somebody brought it to my attention. I didn't want to do it. And they pushed me to do it. So I ended up doing this whole thing. And I had the strangest thing happen where this being of light had appeared. This was a different time, but this being of light that appeared to me in this whole thing. And the reason that it was so odd was because the experience after this particular cleansing, that's when I realized the importance of the body and how pure and clean it should be, which is why I believe evil has polluted the water, the air, our food, our medicine. Everything is just so corrupted, and our bodies are filled with microplastics, herbicides, pesticides. I mean, just it's so insane what the body has to go through right now. But as far as I can see, it's by design. In fact, I'm one of the things that I'm also a specialist in is water. So I show people how to purify water, because I think we were talking a little bit about it, but who does it affect the most? And that's children. Children are their biggest danger for contaminants in water. And we've seen huge spike in medical issues for children, and I think the water is one really, really important thing. I have the lab reports. I know everything that's in there anyway. So all this happened, but I was so curious about this cleanse that I'd been through, which was pretty brutal. It wasn't easy, but I was curious about it because of the things that it was affecting me in ways that I'm like, being the doubter, I'm like, how can this be? This can't be real. I even remember when it happened, ironically, I looked at the date. I looked at the calendar because I'm thinking, I got to remember this date, because I never look at dates. I'm really bad with dates. So I don't remember a lot of the dates of all these things that have happened, but because I'd made that mistake so many times, I was like, this time I'm going to remember the date. So I looked at the calendar, and it was November 11th of 2011. So it was 11/11/11. Oh, this is easy to remember, right? It's 11/11/11, because I'm terrible with numbers and dates. I'm like, oh, that'll be easy to remember. And I thought, what time is it? And I look at the clock, and it was 1:11 p.m. Like this whole thing had happened in that
Wow.
sphere of time. Obviously, it wasn't planned at all. And this being again, this is when it started doing things. There's a lot of things that it started doing to me, but it just started giving me the answers. So like, for example, with scripture, I could look at the Bible and I can tell you what anything meant. It was very confusing to me. The Bible never really made much sense to me. And it just started, it was like downloads. Like I started knowing verses. I started knowing what they meant though. I was being told things that were very confusing. Things like, probably shouldn't even say this. I know I'm going to get a lot of heat for this one. But it told me that the Bible was not really intended for man. And I was like, what? It's the number one selling book of all time. It's intended for everybody. It said no. Because even in the scripture itself, it says, interpretation of the scriptures is not up to man. Interpretation of the scriptures is up to God. He needs to show you what it means, because a verse can be taken very, very differently as compared to what really it was meant to say. And I don't think any human could really do that, because I know I never could. But when he showed me what each time it meant, it was unbelievable. It was like straight to the heart, like, oh, I get that verse now. I know exactly what it means, right? So this whole thing is happening. It's getting really bonkers. And I'm with the Almighty or whatever, and it gets really wild because I'm skipping ahead again. So I'm so intrigued by this particular cleanse that I'd been through. And I started trying to track it down, in the sense that the woman who did it to me, I asked her, I'm like, I know you didn't create this. No offense, but I know you didn't do this. Who taught you? Where did you learn this? Where did this come from? Because nobody could figure out a method like this. You had to have been shown. And she said, yeah, you're right. I was taught. And she told me who taught her. So I tracked that woman down. And I was like, lady, where did you learn this? Because there's something very odd going on. And I don't know why I wanted to get to the bottom of it, because it was doing something to me and I could feel it. And when I feel it, I knew I'm on the right track. It was that easy for me. It was either pain, suffering, and darkness. And when I was onto something, it was obvious for me. It was like a canary in the coal mine. It was too easy. So I tracked her down and she said, have you ever read this particular book that was apparently part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, hidden archives of the Vatican, and all this stuff? And I'm like, never heard of it. She goes, well, go take a look at this book right here, by the way. It's called the Essene Gospel of Peace, right? I think you read it too.
I love it.
So I was like, okay. So I grab it and I read what the guy's story was. And I start reading the book. And to be honest, I'm thinking, okay, again, I'm a doubter, right? So I'm like, all right, and I'm looking at these stories of Jesus and all this stuff, and very different Jesus too, right? Not the Jesus walking on water, but a guy who's showing people how to live, how to eat, how to purify the body, the temple, like whole different perspective. I'm not going to say I wasn't buying into it. I'm just going to say that I wasn't like believing everything I was reading. I'm skeptical, right? I'm just kind of reading it. And there was one thing that changed everything. The very last 4 pages of this book, and this is not to offend anybody, I don't think almost anybody would understand them. I know I would have never understood what these pages mean, except for there's one small thing that changed that. When I was with God, the way that Jesus describes it is perfection. He describes exactly what I saw. He describes exactly what I heard. The whole thing. He wrote it in this book. It's all here. But I don't think it would make much sense to somebody unless they understand, kind of like looking at a verse in the Bible. And I'm reading this thinking, oh my God, I've been looking for this, right? I've been looking for something, not to validate, but to kind of confirm what I went through. And it's so funny what Jesus says in the last pages, because he literally is describing God, but he's not telling you that he's describing God. So he's describing something. And then at the very end, he says exactly what I went through. For this is God, if you did but know it. Because my ideas and the reality were so off base that I didn't even know it was him. As crazy as that sounds, I didn't even know it was God. And so then the story gets even stranger.
Can I pause and ask you a question right there?
Yeah.
Is that the first of the 4 books?
Yeah, so this one is technically, and if you remember what was really beautiful about what this guy did, because this got all published when he died.
Yeah.
He knew it was dangerous. So he left it to a woman that he knew. And he always said, make sure never to sell it for more than $1. So they're always $1, because all the money goes to just making more of them. He cared about the word getting out. It wasn't about money, right? And so this one, technically what this book is a compilation of different writings, and you can see some of the pictures of like the Dead Sea Scrolls and these ancient writings. You can see the scrolls there. And they were supposedly from the hidden archives of the Vatican. His father was a translator. It's this whole story. A lot of people think it's bogus. If you actually Google and look into it, it says it's a hoax. Now, see, I would have probably believed that. I'd be like, oh, okay, whatever, it's probably a hoax. But the problem is, I saw it. You could not write what is in these last 4 pages if you hadn't been to where I was. You just couldn't. You can't make that one up. I'm sorry, but you just can't. That's how I knew that I could at least trust a lot of the things that were being said here. And I did use a lot of his techniques to overcome the medical issues that I had. So it was a very strange journey, but it actually got even weirder. I mean, at this point, I already thought this was very strange. So I'm with him, and I'm there for quite a while. And I remember I'm sitting by a river, and I notice that I could still hear it in the distance. I could still hear the water. And I don't like to go into too much, but I'll just say too, there's a very interesting verse in scripture that says, and the voice of God is like the sound of many waters. Mm-hmm. I also don't think that most people understand what this actually means. And not just what it means, but how it can be used to be able to get in contact with God, by the way. As crazy as that sounds. There's a lot of techniques that I was shown. So I know I have like a library in me. This guy, the Almighty in that realm and all these beings, it's like they were giving me so much information. I am filled with it. And I've considered writing a book, but I'm not a writer. I'm a terrible writer, actually. So I've just been living with all this stuff and I've been applying it in different ways in my life. So I hear the water and then I can hear my heart beat all of a sudden, boom, and then it was like, oh, my body's still there. It's like it felt like it was barely hanging on by a thread. Like it was on the verge of life and death. And so I was a little surprised. And by the way, this is already, I was on the other side, not for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It was hours. I had spent so much time over there in different realms and different places, and so much that I'm actually leaving out. I'm leaving a lot of details out. And so then, for whatever reason, I decided to see if I could open my eyes. And I attempted to open my eyes very slowly, where I was still with the Almighty out there in the universe. And I opened my eyes and now I'm here on earth. I'm in two places at one time. I can't even begin to describe what it feels like because it felt like I had two brains. And I've never lived with two brains. I've always just had one. The spirit has its own like memories, its own life. And then this body that you have for this short period of time has its life. And usually we just live from the flesh. We use our logic. I'm this old. I'm this type of person. I got this job. This is who I am. You think this is me. And the spirit is very different, right? And this is why there's another Bible verse. It just come to me. There's like a verse that says, you must learn to walk with spirit. And what that really is telling you is that if you walk with the flesh, you value the things of this world, it's not really going to get you very far in the deeper things in life. But if your spirit has way more wisdom, and it's very simple why, it's because your spirit's way older. Time gives you wisdom. That's why you don't have a wise 5-year-old typically, And so if you can learn to connect with spirit, which I did in order to see, like when I was in the womb, that was to connect to the spirit is really important. It can change your life. It can really help you understand things on a much deeper level. And you change the way that you are. I changed a lot after a lot of these experiences. So I'm in two places literally at one time. And I can still hear God because I won't describe it right now, but he does have a particular sound to him, which, by the way, is really odd because he describes that in this book too. I'm telling you, he described everything in this thing. It was unbelievable to me. And beautifully to him, poetic, the way it was written, just absolutely gorgeous. And I'm sitting here in two places at one time, but I felt it instinct. My brain wasn't really operating. So my brain I wasn't thinking anything. It was almost like in stillness or in peace. And in order for me to be connected like this, it needed to remain that way. But I'll tell you, when I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed, yes, I'm in two places at one time and all this, but I'd never seen beauty on planet Earth like I saw when I opened my eyes. I saw the kingdom, what they call the kingdom of God is within you and all around you. And I saw it. And I saw the beauty and the light in everything that was alive. And it was unbelievable. I wanted that moment my whole life. It's what I'd been looking for. In fact, at one point it was kind of funny because I remember asking him, I was so mad about what had happened to me as a child that had caused so much pain. And I prayed to God all the time when I was a little kid. asking for help. Help me, get this thing off of me, or what is going on with me? And I don't want to feel this pain anymore. And I prayed so much, and I got to the point where I just didn't even believe in God anymore. I'm like, there's clearly no God. Nobody's answering my prayers. None of the religions work. Nothing's working. I was so frustrated. Reading the spiritual books, they're not making me happy. Like nothing was working. I was so utterly frustrated that like forget about it. And I don't know how important it is to the story, but there was a strange decision I was going to make. I decided about 1 to 2 months before this day. So it's very odd that this day was happening, this particular day, the day on the rock, as I call it. But I did get to ask him, and I was almost asked it a little angrily. I'm a little embarrassed because I'm like, almost like I was asking God almost like, you better have a good answer, mister. Why didn't you help me? Like, why didn't you help me? Like, I don't think you're going to come up with a good answer. And boy, did he come up with a very good answer. I felt like a dog putting the tail between my legs because he showed me visions. Again, he took me back. It's almost took me back to when I was a kid, and he showed me praying to him and that he was there and that he was watching and he was listening. But then what he told me a few things. One, he told me that he allowed this thing to happen. So I was really confused about that. I'm like, you allowed this? Like, do you know what this did to me? Like, what are you doing? Like, why would you allow such a thing? And then he said, for if I had not allowed it, you would have never found me. That's what he told me. I knew it was true. The moment the truth came out, I couldn't be angry at him. I still don't like what I've had to go through, but looking for happiness in a way that was non-biased. It didn't have to be a specific religion. It didn't have to be what my friends or family believed. It didn't have to be what anybody believed. I didn't care about that. I just wanted the truth, and I just felt like it would help me. And he showed me a lot of other things. There's so much. I mean, we're talking like decisions that I made before I was born. I didn't realize that I chose a lot of this, all of these different, there's so much to share, but the only thing I can tell you what happened next, because this is probably the craziest thing. I still have my doubts, as crazy as this is. After all this, if you can imagine that I'm still having my doubts. I started thinking maybe I'm going crazy. I was having my doubts. So I'm sitting here, seeing the kingdom, overloaded with joy. Everything's so amazing. My best friend, I'll call him my best friend for right now. He's been very close with me on this journey. Maybe I should just say it. This is my brother, the same brother that was asked the same question I was asked. And we've been very close. And I look over, and at that same exact moment, he turned and looked at me, and we were very far away. I couldn't yell. He wouldn't be able to hear me. But we locked eyes in the distance, and I just raised my hand and kind of wait for him to come to me. And then I just went back into my stillness, just hearing, feeling God. I could hear him, seeing the kingdom, and I'm just sitting there in just absolute awe. Like, couldn't be more happy. I'm just sitting there just happy that I just couldn't believe this was happening. I just couldn't believe this is happening. My eyes are open right now. I'm not dreaming, but am I going crazy, right? So, but I wasn't thinking much anyway. I wasn't thinking whether it was real or not. I was just experiencing it, whether that was right or wrong. So my brother's walking. It takes quite a while. He eventually gets to me, and I still remember what I told him. All I said was, I said, if you want to learn something, now's the time. If not, it's totally cool. We can go play in the river and finish out our beautiful day, basically. He's like, oh, no, what's going on? And so he sat down with me on the rock, and I could hear God's voice, but I wanted to see if he could hear it, or am I crazy? Right? Because I'm like, now I need to start seeing if I can get somebody to verify this, or again, I'm Looney Tunes. So I'm trying to ask him if he can hear it, and he's really trying to hear it. Like, he was there for probably 20, 30 minutes, the poor guy. And he's trying, and he finally gets a little frustrated. He's like, dude, I don't hear anything. And I'm just like, I'm not even saying anything. He just said, I don't hear anything. So he goes to stand up. He's like half, because we were sitting on this rock. I don't know if I should share this. So he goes to stand up, and halfway, I don't want to say that I didn't have control, because I did. I could have chosen to do anything with my body at that moment. I could have moved my arm. I could do whatever out of my own will. I felt the thought didn't even happen. It was so like something used my body. God used my body. And I reached down my arm extremely fast, like ninja quick or something, and grabbed his arm right here. I grabbed his forearm as he was standing up, his right arm specifically. And when I grabbed it, he was trying to stand up, so I kind of like pulled him down a little bit. And he turned to look at me. And I looked at him, and we just locked eyes. And I started squeezing his arm quite hard. And I'm thinking like, what are you doing? Because I didn't want to hurt him. But I was allowing some people might call it the Holy Spirit. I don't know what you would call it. I'm just allowing at this point for him to do whatever he's doing. He's squeezing him so hard to the point where I thought I was going to break his arm. And then that's when my brother's eyes really opened. And later on, my brother conveyed to me, he's like, I thought you were going to break my arm, but it reached just that tiny little inch more and I would have hurt him. But so I'm squeezing and his eyes get really big and we're locked in our eyes. What are you doing? And I look into his eyes and I don't know how to describe it to you, Melissa, but I could see everything. I saw the universe. I saw him and me and him, the whole, everything, all of us. And I just said in a very aggressive way, which is not me. I actually felt embarrassed the way that I said it because I'm like, it wasn't me, but it was going through me. And I just said, can't you hear it? Because he was trying to hear God, I get, the sound that I was talking about. And I said it so aggressively to him. And the moment I said it, boom, the sound came on so strong and my brother's eyes just opened. He was like, what's going on? And everything went black. He couldn't see anymore. So he couldn't see the river. He couldn't see nothing. I'm telling you the things that he told me later, but the whole time I knew everything he was thinking, feeling, seeing. I don't know. I knew everything. He didn't even have to tell me. And everything goes black. And this is where I began to understand another particular verse that in scripture that I had read, or that actually was given to me because I didn't really read the Bible. It would always have to come to me and then I'd have to go look. He was so scared. It wasn't a thing of joy and light and beauty. He was terrified. And there is a verse, I don't know if you remember this particular verse, but there's this verse where like these guys, it literally says, and they trembled before his might. And that's exactly what happened. He heard the sound and he literally tried to run. And he didn't even get his foot off the ground. He went to move his foot, his leg, like I'm about to take my foot off the ground or whatever to run. He tried to run and then God spoke. He said, there is no place you can run to, no place you can hide, no rock you can crawl under. And my brother just froze. And he was seeing all the darkness and all the, as my brother would call it, sin within him. And that's what was terrifying him. What was terrifying was the very thing that he had inside of him I think there's a lot of things in humans that they don't even know are there. And they block them because they're afraid. Why are they afraid? Because it really hurts. It hurts too much. And so this whole thing was happening. And finally I see that my brother's like panicking. I could just see that his heart, and I just knew it. And that's when I finally spoke and I said, brother, don't be afraid. He's not going to hurt you. He's not here to hurt you. And he said that the moment he heard my voice, I'm giving you his part, he heard my voice, he heard the direction it was coming from because he couldn't see anymore. His eyes were open, but he couldn't see anything. It was like he was in this different realm or space. God did something at that moment. So he turns to me and he tells me to this day, he's like, I hear your voice. And I'm just like, he goes, I just want to kind of go towards you because I'm so afraid. And you just told me, don't be afraid. You seem to understand whatever this is. And then that's when he finally could see again. And he looked in my eyes and he said, what is it? He didn't recognize it either. Because God is so different than our ideas. I mean, it's so unbelievable, but he could hear him. And he was now not just before us. I remember that was the first thing my brother asked was, what is it? And because I'm this kind of person, this kind of personality where I didn't want to try to define it. I didn't want to be like, oh, this is God, this is this. I just said, I don't know. Because I've in those realms, I remember I was told once, in order to go deeper, it said, in order to know who you are, you must forget who you think you are. And it also says, like, let go of all your ideas, preconceived notions, let go of all your inhibitions, let go of everything. And so that's why I'm very like free in the sense where I don't lock myself down to certain beliefs. I just don't do that. I always feel like I have to be open to understanding the greater things. And so my brother's there and he's like, yeah, like I said, he's like, what is this? I don't know. And then he's looking around, and this is another hard thing that's hard to describe. I believe it's in scripture too. Excuse me. His sound, his voice was coming from everywhere and everything, every leaf, the water, the rocks, the wind itself, everything. It was beyond any surround sound I've ever heard. I mean, it was everywhere. It was below our feet. And my brother's like, where is it coming from? He's like, it just sounds like it's everywhere. Like we couldn't figure it out, right? And I don't know why I did this, but when he asked that, I felt that thing again, that thing that grabbed his arm, the spirit, and I just leaned my head back and I opened my mouth really loud, or I'm sorry, really big. And the sound got huge. And my brother looks at me like, oh my God, it's coming from inside of you. And it just got crazy loud, everything. And we just sat there. And then he started giving us both visions, the both of us. And I started seeing these things, mountains. I started seeing these mountains, specifically 3 of them. But I didn't want to say anything because my brother is very different than I am. My brother is the kind of person that says, like, if you're like, oh yeah, don't you see a bird? He's like, oh yeah, I see it. He's very like, just agree with he sees what people tell him to see. And I'm not like that. I'm like the doubter, like, I don't see a bird, So we're like opposite. So I didn't want to put any ideas in his head. So I'm seeing these mountains. And then I tell my brother, I'm like, do you see that? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? He's like, yeah, I see mountains. I'm like, that's what I see too. But I didn't say anything. I made sure that I would never say anything. I wanted him to say it. And then I'm like, do you see how many? Yeah. And there's faces. And then God said, he said it so one of the things that I remember feeling was I had so much doubts about whether God even existed. I know he does now. So, I mean, it's clear as day. He definitely exists. I already know. But I needed this to believe that. I love that maybe the Bible says these beautiful things like, as blessed is he who believes without seeing. I mean, that's great. That wasn't me. Like, I don't know why I wanted proof. I needed proof. That's just me. Now I'm all in. I already know. It's not even all in. I already know. It's clear. So we're looking at these mountains, and I remember I could feel it all the way down into like the marrow of my bone. I felt every single thing in my body down to my bones. Any doubt I ever had was gone. I know what he is. I know that he's there. I even know what we have to do to get to him. Like the whole thing, there's so much information that I do have on this particular subject, which is very odd because I'm not a priest. I'm not professing anything. I'm just saying how it is, how it happened, and the story. And we're looking at these, and then he says, this is where I reside. And I was thinking, what? What do you mean he's at the mountain? It kind of didn't make any sense to me. I could go climb the top of the mountain. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to find him. So I didn't totally understand. I still kind of maybe have my questions, but I did notice later that, like Moses went top to the mountain to talk to God, right? All these things that throughout history and stories. And so he said that, and we just sat there and like felt him. He didn't say a lot of words. All the words that he spoke were the few that I already shared. And we were just sitting there, and it was just, well, I know there's more pieces that I guess I won't totally get into because the story gets too long, but so we just sat there for quite a while. But that particular day, as maybe you can imagine, completely changed my life because the things that I now value, the things that I see about human life and experience, and there's so many more stories to share, it taught me and showed me what I'm supposed to do. And to be quite honest, I don't even know how to explain this either, but it's almost like, well, he's definitely with me. Obviously, he's with all of us really, but he's with me so strong and in such a different way that if I even think of doing something wrong, like, I don't know, if I say something to hurt somebody's feelings, not because I'm trying to, but just because I maybe didn't word it the right way, it hurts so bad. I have a real difficult time with this. Sometimes I just feel like I just have a really hard time with it because if I do something that's wrong, it just hurts so bad. It drives me insane. It hurts. So I want to be good. for the sake of being good. Like, you don't have to tell me, hey, you're going to go to hell if you're a bad person. I don't need that. I do things for the love of it, and I just know that it's the right thing, and because I don't want to feel that discomfort. It robs me of my peace. And it's my peace that I long for. It's my favorite emotion of all the emotions. I love being at peace. And it's a very important thing too, because I think a lot of people, I hate to say this, but I think a lot of people misunderstand a lot of what Jesus told us. Because if you notice in scripture, I've never seen one place where Jesus said, hey, may God be with you. That's odd, because when I was a kid and went to the Catholic Church, that's what they'd say, may God be with you and also with you, and everybody's doing their greetings, right? But what did Jesus actually say? Peace be with you. And then what's the title of this book? The Essene
Gospel of Peace.
Peace is the way, Melissa. When you silence all things, in fact, there's a scriptural verse where Jesus says, be still and know I am God. Not in an arrogant, like people could be like, oh, you think you're this or that. No. Clear, without him, like I think Jesus said it too, without him, I am nothing. I'm very well aware of that. And I don't think that I'm greater than him at all. He's so massive, by the way. His size, huge. We're like a little ant. Not even an ant. And I love him so much. And I always have.
Thank you so much for watching. My guests' links can be found in the description box. If you have had a near-death experience, pre-birth experience, out-of-body experience, past or between life memories, or spiritual awakening story that you would like to share, find the link to apply in the description box. If you would like to support the channel, we have a few fun ways that you can do that. I do have a merch store linked in the description. We've put some of the phrases on t-shirts that you guys requested. I have affiliate links to my favorite blue blockers, my favorite red light panel, and a couple of other companies that I work with. You can join my membership at the Sanctuary. You can sign up for an energy healing. I also offer a 4-session energy healing package. You'll find all these links in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your support. Now go live your most extravagantly loving life.